Whenever you imagine Gandalf, you probably envision an old wizard, wrapped in grey, blue, and white clothes. Besides his pointy hat and long grey beard, the most iconic part about him is his wizard staff. It's one of the most powerful weapons in Middle-earth, and it's one of the rarest, with only 6 ever being produced, since Gandalf wielded 2 different ones as Gandalf the Grey and Gandalf the White, and only 5 proper wizards being able to wield them. There are actual fewer staffs than there are rings of power. Since these staffs were capable of such incredible feats, like repelling the Nazgul, breaking the bridge of Khazad-dûm, and expelling Saruman's evil from King Theoden, they must have been made from some pretty incredible material. Today, we're going to look into exactly how these wizard staffs were constructed, and what exactly made them so special. Since Tolkien never explicitly states much about the construction of the staffs, we need to walk back from the first days of wizards in Middle-earth and deduce what we can about the topic. So, if we begin with the first mention of the staffs, we find that they arrived with Gandalf, Saruman, Radagast, and the 2 blue wizards, Alatar and Pallando, when the 5 were sent to Middle-earth. If you remember, the 5 wizards appeared somewhere around the year 1000 of the Third Age, so they weren't actually a group of old, bearded, elderly chaps either. In truth, actually, they were like 5 gods from the immortal kingdom of Valinor, a distant land removed from the earth that only the elves really knew how to reach. So the 5 wizards were sent to Middle-earth to prepare its residents for their inevitable conflict with Sauron. They were then adorned in different colors according to their rank, with white being the highest. Now, as part of their mission, this order of wizards, known as the Istari, were forbidden from using their powers to do anything other than counsel men, women, elves, dwarves, and other magical creatures. Again, they were there primarily to help them against the rising shadow of Mordor. But as we've seen, it was too easy for them to become distracted. Saruman was seduced by power, much like Sauron and his mentor Melkor. Radagast was often said to have become too fond of beasts and birds, ignoring the men, elves, dwarves of Middle-earth that desperately needed the help of a wise and powerful wizard. Even Gandalf, who would be the only wizard to properly fulfill the mission, often became distracted by his love of the peoples of Middle-earth. But I digress. The important thing to remember here is that the 5 wizards arrived in Middle-earth from the home of the gods, Valinor, and they were already carrying staffs at that time. Also, they were under strict orders from the leader of the gods to not use their powers. So, let's take a step back. At this point in the story, what can we gather about the staffs and their origins? Well, for starters, it seems that the staffs didn't originate from Middle-earth, since the Istari had them in their possession when they were getting off their ships, meaning they were likely created in Valinor, and if they were, probably created by the gods of that land. But we also know that the wizards of Tolkien's world aren't actually wizards and are instead gods, disguised as old wise men. Since we know that, it would indicate that the staffs themselves weren't the source of any particular great power, but the beings who wielded them, the Maiar gods of Valinor, were the source. If we think about them like that, then perhaps there was never any intricate, incredible construction in the staffs themselves. They could, for all intents and purposes, be simple wooden sticks that act like a conduit of the actual powers of the gods who bear them. I think the latter maybe seems a little more likely, don't you? And even when we look at the events that transpire around the Istari, we find that there's ample evidence that their staffs were made of simple material. When Gandalf returned as Gandalf the White, he broke Saruman's staff and declared that he had no power. This would seem to indicate that Saruman's staff was a source of great power. Why else would Gandalf make a big deal out of breaking it? But when you dig a little bit deeper, this incident reveals something else. Gandalf didn't use his own staff to break Saruman's. Instead, he just willed it into destruction. Now, some might say that maybe Gandalf was just that strong he didn't even need a staff anymore, like Dumbledore not using a wand. But if Saruman's staff was really that much of a powerful magical instrument, then it would have taken an equally great magical device to break it. But instead, Gandalf was able to break it with just a thought. This demonstrates that the staff, or staves if you want to use it as a different pluralization of the word, were again conduits of a wizard's power, and not a greatly powerful device unto themselves. It's not like someone could just get the staff and immediately have Gandalf's power. Just imagine Louis Armstrong and his trumpet. If a random person were to pick up a trumpet off the street, they wouldn't be able to play it. And if Armstrong were without his trumpet, he still would be able to create great music. Through his voice, or even with a simple clap of his hands. Or maybe he could even imitate a trumpet from pursing his lips together, who knows? I think we can kinda sorta use this analogy for the staffs of the Istari. And since there were only 5 total trumpet players in Middle-earth, meaning wizards of course, then any random passerby wouldn't be able to pick up the staff and do much of anything with it. Okay, so at this point we've established 2 things. 1, the staffs probably came from Valinor, the land of the gods, and 2, they were probably not that special, and might have just been part of the wizard's disguise or a simple conduit for the wizard's own inherent power. But what does this have to do with the main question? What was Gandalf's staff made of? And I know you're probably like, well, why didn't you just tell me this from the beginning? Well, I'm building the backstory, I'm talking about the theories. Since we know Tolkien didn't explain, all that much, the composition of the staffs in the books, we need to use some logic to figure out exactly how they were made and how powerful they were. So now that we know that they weren't elaborate, custom-crafted magical wands like, let's say, the wands in Harry Potter, what else could they be? Well, in one particular part of the Lord of the Rings novels, Tolkien does manage to give us a single detail about the material from which staffs were created. When Gandalf the White arrived at the hall of King Theoden, Tolkien described his staff as ash. This simple description is perhaps the most that he has ever given to a wizard's staff. We often imagine them as beautiful, dark wood, knobbed walking sticks from the movies, but in actuality, the beauty from those was designed later by artists and the film crew. Since ash is the most we can go off of, then we'll have to deduce what exactly this means. Well, ash is a beautiful tree, famous for its uses in constructing furniture, crafts, and even walking sticks. It's noted for its white color and can be stained with oils to really shine. But it's fairly unremarkable by comparison to the great trees of Lothlorien, the Malorn. The fact that such an average piece of wood would serve as the substance of Gandalf's staff says a few things about wizard staff as a whole. Again, it reinforces the idea that they're simply instruments for the wizards and not a great source of power themselves. And it also shows us that perhaps, like the clothes the wizards wear, the staffs themselves are more ceremonial than not. When the Istari first arrived in Middle-earth from Valinor, they were adorned in different color robes to account for their different ranks. Saruman was dressed in white, as he was the highest of their order. But later, when Gandalf returned, he became the White, and he needed a new staff to represent the new stature. So our whole investigation into the composition of staffs, and whether or not they have any innate magical properties, might be as foolish as trying to figure out whether or not the wizard's robes, hats, or scarves had any magical abilities. Perhaps the staffs too were just meant to demark the rank of the Istari members. Alas, when it comes to the material of the staffs, it's likely that this brief description by Tolkien that Gandalf the White Staff was ash is perhaps the most important thing that we need to know. His staff as the highest ranking member of the Order, and his staff when he was Gandalf the Grey, were likely made of simple, good, honest wood. Ash for when he was Gandalf the White, and perhaps oak or some type of thorn tree when he was Gandalf the Grey. During his time as a lesser member of the Istari Order, his staff was only described as being thorny in appearance. The fact that Gandalf's staff was simple wood says a lot about him. He was, again, the only member of the Istari to stick to the original goal. Radagast was too enamored with nature and animals. Saruman was greedy with power and just hungry for it. And the 2 blue wizards were either complete failures or perhaps important, but only in the affairs in the land east of Mordor. Whatever the case may be, Gandalf was the only one who really embodied the mission set forth from the Valar, the High Gods of Valinor. And it was that he should do everything he could to counsel and motivate the peoples of Middle-earth against the powers of Sauron, all the while not using his full might as a god. So, I guess, why would Gandalf's staff need to be made out of anything special to begin with? Well, I hope you guys enjoyed my little theory and explanation in this video. I hope you subscribe if you are new here. I hope you hit like if you enjoyed it, and let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you think it really even matters, or do you have maybe your own information, or is there something I didn't even mention? Thanks for checking this video out. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, remember. Well, actually, I want you guys to come up with an outro for all the Lord of the Rings videos. So since this channel is going to cover so many different movies and franchises and worlds and universes, the Marvel stuff always ends with great power comes great responsibility. So the Lord of the Rings, what do you guys want me to say? Maybe until the next video, remember.
For little hobbitses, make sure to hit like, or I'll show up in your sleep.